The rain fell hard that November evening, drumming against the pavement like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be heard. Marcus Webb stood under the flickering streetlight outside the community center, his small frame barely reaching the height of the donation bin beside him. At 3 feet 9 inches tall, the world had always looked different to Marcus, towering and vast. But he had learned long ago that the size of a man's heart had nothing to do with the measurements of his body. He adjusted the worn collar of his jacket and checked his watch. The support group meeting had run late, and now the bus schedule would be off. Marcus worked as a clockmaker, a trade that suited his careful hands and patient temperament, and punctuality mattered to him. But as he turned to head toward the bus stop, something caught his eye. A figure sat huddled against the brick wall of the building, knees drawn up, face hidden in folded arms. The rain soaked through what looked like expensive clothes, a designer coat now heavy with water. Marcus paused. He had learned to notice the invisible people, the ones the world walked past without seeing. He knew what it felt like to be overlooked. "Excuse me?" he said gently, approaching slowly. "Are you all right?" The figure didn't move at first. Then, slowly, a face lifted from the darkness. A girl, maybe 16 or 17, with red-rimmed eyes and mascara streaked down her pale cheeks. Her blonde hair hung in wet strands, and her lips trembled from cold or emotion or both. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Just leave me alone." Marcus should have walked away. He had his own struggles, his own bills piling up on the kitchen counter of his modest apartment. The rent was due in 3 days, and the refrigerator made that concerning humming sound again. But something in the girl's eyes stopped him, a desperation he recognized from his own mirror on the hardest nights. "I'm Marcus," he said, crouching down so they were at eye level. "And I can't just leave someone sitting in the rain. That's not who I am." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the moment her eyes registered his stature. But unlike so many others, there was no judgment there, no cruel laughter or pitying glances. She just saw another human being offering kindness. "I'm Olivia," she said finally, "and I have nowhere to go." The words hung in the wet air between them. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He extended his hand. "Then come with me. Let's get you warm and dry, and you can tell me what happened." Olivia hesitated, studying this small man with the gentle eyes and the quiet strength radiating from him. Something in his presence felt safe, like an anchor in a storm. She took his hand and stood. Marcus's apartment was tiny, a studio on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator was broken, and the climb up the narrow stairs was harder for him than he ever let on. But he managed it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had adapted to a world not built for him. Olivia followed in silence, her expensive shoes squeaking with each step. Inside, the space was immaculate despite its size. Every item had its place. A workbench dominated one corner, covered with the intricate parts of clocks and watches in various states of repair. The pieces caught the light from the single lamp, casting tiny shadows like a mechanical constellation. Books lined makeshift shelves and photographs in mismatched frames showed Marcus at different ages, always smiling, always surrounded by people who looked at him with genuine affection. "The bathroom's there," Marcus said, pointing to a door barely visible behind a curtain. "There's towels in the cabinet. I'll make some tea." Olivia disappeared behind the curtain, and Marcus heard the water running. He put the kettle on his small stovetop and pulled out 2 mugs, one with a chip on the rim that he always used himself. When she emerged 15 minutes later, wrapped in his largest towel that still barely fit around her, her face was clean and young and frightened. They sat at his tiny kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm mugs, and slowly, Olivia began to talk. She came from the kind of wealth that Marcus had only seen in magazines. The Harrington family, old money that stretched back generations, the kind of name that opened doors and commanded respect in certain circles. Her father, William Harrington, ran a real estate empire. Her mother, Victoria, sat on the boards of museums and charities, the kind of woman who wore pearls to breakfast and considered emotion a weakness. "They never wanted me," Olivia said, staring into her tea. "I was supposed to be the son who would take over the business, but I came out wrong, and they never forgave me for it." Her hands shook slightly as she continued. "I tried everything to make them proud. Perfect grades, violin lessons, debate team, everything they wanted. But it was never enough. My mother looked at me like I was a disappointment she had to endure at dinner parties. My father spent more time with his business partners than he ever did with me." The story spilled out in painful fragments. The boarding schools where she was sent to be shaped into something presentable. The summers spent with nannies while her parents traveled. The birthday parties where the guests were chosen for their parents' social standing rather than any friendship with Olivia. The constant criticism, the cold indifference wrapped in expensive gifts. Then came the final breaking point. Olivia had been accepted to art school, a prestigious program in New York where she dreamed of studying painting. But her parents had other plans. They had arranged for her to attend their alma mater, to study business and economics, to become the heir they needed her to be. "I told them no," Olivia said, and for the first time that night, there was fire in her voice. "I told them I wanted to choose my own life, make my own decisions. And my father, he just looked at me with these cold eyes and said, 'Then you're no daughter of mine.' Just like that, like cutting off a business deal that wasn't profitable anymore. They had given her an ultimatum, obey or leave. And when she chose her own path, they had their lawyer serve her with papers. Emancipation, they called it, though it felt more like excommunication. At 17, Olivia Harrington was officially no longer part of the family that had never really wanted her in the first place. "I left with what I could carry," she said. "I thought I could stay with my friend Emma, but when I got there, her parents had already heard from mine. They wouldn't even open the door. I've been walking around the city all day, trying to figure out what to do." Tears ran down her face again, but this time she didn't hide them. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were small but strong, weathered by years of precise work and hard living. "You can stay here tonight," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." Olivia looked up at him with disbelief. "Why? Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Marcus smiled, a sad, understanding smile. "Because I know what it's like to be rejected for something you can't control. Because I know what it's like when the world decides you're not enough just because you're different. And because no kid should have to sleep on the streets when there's someone who can help." That night, Marcus gave Olivia his bed, a narrow twin mattress that barely fit in the corner behind another curtain. He made himself a makeshift bed on the floor with cushions and blankets, ignoring her protests. As he lay there in the darkness, listening to the city sounds filtering through the thin walls, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. But somehow, it felt right. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Marcus continued going to his workshop, the small shop in the old district where he repaired clocks and watches for customers who appreciated craftsmanship over convenience. Olivia would come with him, sitting in the corner with a sketchbook Marcus had bought her from the art supply store, drawing the intricate mechanisms of the timepieces, the way light fell through the dusty window, the faces of customers who came and went. She was talented, Marcus realized, watching her work. Her drawings captured not just the physical details, but something deeper, the essence of moments and people. When she drew his hands at work, piecing together the tiny gears of a pocket watch, she somehow made visible the love he had for his craft, the meditation of precise movement. "You have a gift," he told her one afternoon, looking over her shoulder at a sketch of the shop's interior. Olivia shrugged, but he could see the pleasure his words brought her. My parents thought art was a waste of time. They said only people who couldn't do anything real became artists. Your parents were wrong about a lot of things, Marcus said simply. Art is about seeing the world in ways other people miss. That's not a waste, that's a gift. In the evenings, they would return to the tiny apartment and cook dinner together. Marcus taught Olivia how to make meals on a budget, how to stretch ingredients and create something delicious from simple things. She had never cooked before, had grown up with private chefs and catered events, and she approached each lesson with a mixture of awkwardness and determination that made Marcus smile. "I burned the rice again," she announced one night, holding up a pot of scorched grains. "That's okay," Marcus said, examining the damage. "That's how you learn. Besides, we needed some extra carbon in our diet." She laughed then, the first real laugh he had heard from her, and the sound filled the small apartment with unexpected warmth. They talked during those dinners, really talked. Marcus told her about growing up with achondroplasia, the most common form of dwarfism, in a small town where different meant target. He told her about the bullying, the stares, the endless doctor's appointments and surgeries. But he also told her about the people who had seen past his size, the teacher who had encouraged his love of mechanics, the mentor who had taught him clockmaking, the neighbors who had become his chosen family. "I learned early that family isn't always about blood," he said. "Sometimes it's about who shows up, who sees you for who you really are and decides that's enough." Olivia listened with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every word, storing them away like provisions for a long journey. She told him about the loneliness of her childhood, the way she had learned to perform the role of the perfect daughter while feeling like a stranger in her own life. She talked about the small rebellions, the secret art projects she had hidden in her closet, the dreams she had whispered to herself in the dark. "I used to imagine a different life," she said one night, "one where I mattered because of who I was, not what I could become for someone else." "You always mattered," Marcus said firmly. "Your parents' inability to see that was their failure, not yours." 3 weeks passed, and the arrangement that was supposed to be temporary began to feel like something more permanent. Marcus filed paperwork to become Olivia's temporary guardian, navigating the social services system with a determination that surprised even him. The caseworker, a tired woman named Helen with kind eyes, seemed skeptical at first. "Mr. Webb," she said during their first meeting, her eyes flicking between Marcus and Olivia, "this is highly unusual. You're not related, you have limited space, and frankly, your financial situation is precarious." "I know," Marcus said calmly. "But she has nowhere else to go, and I have room in my life for one more. I may not have much money, but I have time, patience, and the willingness to try. That has to count for something." Helen studied him for a long moment, then looked at Olivia, who sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Is this what you want?" Helen asked her. "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Marcus has been more of a family to me in 3 weeks than my parents were in 17 years. Something in the girl's voice must have convinced Helen, because she sighed and began filling out forms. "We'll start with a temporary arrangement," she said. "But I'll be checking in regularly. This better work out, Mr. Webb." "It will," Marcus promised, and he meant it. But the universe had other plans. Winter arrived with brutal cold, and with it came challenges that tested Marcus in ways he hadn't anticipated. The building's heating system failed, leaving the apartment frigid for 3 days, while the landlord dragged his feet on repairs. Marcus and Olivia huddled together under every blanket they owned, their breath visible in the air, but they made it through. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcus woke to the sound of Olivia crying, soft sobs muffled by her pillow. He got up carefully, his joints stiff from the cold floor, and knocked gently on the frame of the curtain that separated her space. "Olivia? Can I come in?" A pause, then a whispered, "Okay." She was sitting up in bed, clutching her knees, and in the dim light from the street, he could see the tears on her face. Without asking permission, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "I saw her today," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "My mother. She was coming out of that fancy restaurant on 5th Street. She looked right at me, Marcus. She saw me, and she just turned away and got into her car like I wasn't even there." The pain in her voice was visceral, and Marcus felt it in his own chest. He knew that particular wound, the one that came from being invisible to someone who was supposed to love you. "I keep thinking," Olivia continued, "that maybe if I tried harder, if I was better, they might want me back. And I hate myself for even wanting that, after everything they did." "Come here," Marcus said, opening his arms. Olivia collapsed into his embrace, sobbing against his shoulder while he held her, this girl who was too tall for him to hold comfortably, but who fit perfectly against his heart. "Listen to me," he said when her tears began to slow. "The fact that you still love them, even after how they hurt you, doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But their inability to love you back, that's on them. That's their failure, their loss, their tragedy, not yours." "How do you do it?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "How do you stay so kind after everything you've been through?" Marcus smiled sadly. "I decided a long time ago that the cruelty I experienced didn't get to define me, that I could choose to be the person I needed when I was young and scared and alone. Being bitter would have been easier, but it wouldn't have made me happy. And I decided I wanted to be happy more than I wanted to be angry. I want to be like you," Olivia whispered. "You already are," Marcus said. "You're brave and talented and kind. You just need time to see it yourself." The months that followed brought a transformation neither of them could have predicted. Olivia threw herself into her art with new intensity, filling sketchbooks with drawings that captured the beauty in ordinary moments. She drew the elderly woman who came into the shop every Tuesday to have her late husband's watch cleaned. She drew the pigeons that gathered on the fire escape, their feathers catching the morning light. She drew Marcus at his workbench, his face illuminated by concentration and love for his craft. Marcus encouraged her to submit a portfolio to art programs, helping her photograph her work and draft application essays. On the nights when doubt crept in, when Olivia wondered if she was good enough, Marcus would sit with her and methodically point out the strength in each piece, the unique perspective that made her art special. "You see the world differently," he told her. "That's not a flaw. That's your superpower." Meanwhile, Marcus's reputation as a clockmaker grew. Word spread about the small man with the magic hands who could repair anything, and business improved. It wasn't wealth, not by any measure, but it was enough. Enough to move into a slightly larger apartment, one with a separate bedroom for Olivia and heat that actually worked. Enough to buy her proper art supplies and pay for a Saturday class at the community college. Enough to build a life. They created traditions, Sunday morning pancakes with competitions to see who could flip them higher. Tuesday movie nights with popcorn made on the stove because they couldn't afford a microwave, but Marcus insisted the old way tasted better anyway. Thursday evening walks through the city, where Olivia would photograph interesting architectural details, and Marcus would explain the history of the old buildings, the stories written in brick and stone. Olivia started calling him Dad, without either of them acknowledging when the shift happened. It started as a joke, then became casual, then became truth. And Marcus, who had never thought he would be a father, found that the role fit him perfectly, like a watch mechanism clicking into place. But the past has a way of catching up, and on a bright spring afternoon, it arrived at Marcus's shop in the form of William Harrington. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus looked up from the anniversary clock he was adjusting to see a man in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that was used to getting its way. Behind him stood a woman with perfect posture and cold eyes, Victoria Harrington. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked politely, though his heart had begun to race. "You're Marcus Webb," William said. It wasn't a question. "The man who's been harboring our daughter." "I'm the man who gave your daughter a home when you threw her away," Marcus corrected, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "If you're here to see Olivia, she's at her art class." "We're not here for her," Victoria said, her voice as cold as Marcus had imagined. "We're here to make you an offer." They laid it out with the precision of a business transaction. $100,000 for Marcus to convince Olivia to come home, to give up this art nonsense, and accept her place in the family business. They had a position waiting for her, they explained, a path already laid out. All Marcus had to do was help them guide her back to where she belonged. "She's wasting her potential with you," William said, looking around the small shop with barely concealed disdain. "Living in poverty, chasing impossible dreams, we can give her everything." Marcus felt anger rising in his throat, hot and bitter. But years of being underestimated had taught him control. He stood up from his workbench, his small frame somehow filling the space with quiet authority. "Let me tell you about your daughter," he said, his voice soft but fierce. "She's brilliant. She's kind. She has a gift that could touch thousands of people if she's allowed to pursue it. And she's happy, maybe for the first time in her life, because someone finally sees her value." "You're speaking about things you don't understand," Victoria said dismissively. "You're a tradesman. You can't possibly grasp what's at stake here." "I understand that you had a daughter who needed you, and you failed her," Marcus said. "I understand that you measured her worth by how well she fit your plans instead of celebrating who she was. And I understand that you're not offering her a home. You're offering her a cage lined with money." "That's enough," William said, his voice hardening. "We're prepared to take this to court if necessary. Fight us, and we'll bury you in legal fees. We'll prove you're an unfit guardian. Do you really think a judge will side with you over us?" "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that Olivia is almost 18, old enough to make her own choices. And I think you should leave my shop now." William's face darkened, but Victoria placed a hand on his arm. "We'll be back," she said. "And when Olivia realizes what a mistake she's made, that you can't actually give her anything of value, she'll come home on her own." They left in a cloud of expensive perfume and barely contained rage. Marcus stood in the empty shop, his hands shaking, wondering if he had just made everything worse. He told Olivia that evening, unable to keep it from her. They sat at their small kitchen table, the remnants of dinner between them, and he watched her face cycle through emotions: shock, pain, anger, and finally determination. "They think money is the only thing of value," she said quietly. "They always have. They threatened to take me to court," Marcus admitted. "Said they'd prove I was unfit. And Olivia, they might succeed. I don't have their resources. I can't fight them the way they can fight me." Olivia stood up abruptly, walked to her corner of the apartment, and returned with her newest sketchbook. She opened it to a page filled with drawings of Marcus, of their apartment, of the small moments that had filled their months together. Cooking disasters and movie nights and walks through the city. A life built on love instead of money. "This," she said, pointing to the drawings, "this is value. You taught me that I matter just for being me. You showed me what family actually means. They can offer me the world, Marcus, but you gave me something they never could. You gave me myself." Marcus felt tears in his eyes, and he didn't try to hide them. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I'm staying," Olivia said firmly. "Whatever they do, whatever happens, I'm staying with you. You're my dad now. That's not something they can take away with lawyers or money." The legal battle that followed was brutal. True to their word, the Harringtons filed for custody. claiming Marcus was an unfit guardian. They trotted out experts who questioned his ability to provide for Olivia, who suggested his dwarfism made him physically incapable of proper care, who painted a picture of a delusional man playing house with a vulnerable child. Marcus couldn't afford a lawyer, but he didn't need one. At 18, Olivia became legally an adult, and she testified in court with a clarity and strength that silenced the room. She brought her sketchbooks, her acceptance letters from art schools, her evidence of a life transformed. "They're my biological parents," she told the judge, "but Marcus Webb is my dad. He's the one who showed up. He's the one who chose me every single day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That's what family is." The judge ruled in their favor, and the Harringtons left the courthouse without looking back. Olivia watched them go, and Marcus saw the grief on her face. But he also saw the peace. Sometimes closure isn't about getting what you want. Sometimes it's about accepting what you can't change. 5 years later, Marcus stood in an art gallery in Manhattan, surrounded by people in expensive clothes holding glasses of wine. On the walls hung Olivia's paintings, large canvases that captured moments of beauty in ordinary life, a clockmaker's hands piecing together tiny gears, an elderly woman smiling at memories, a father and daughter cooking together in a tiny kitchen, love visible in every brushstroke. The exhibition was titled Family: A Redefinition, and it had garnered attention from critics and collectors alike. Olivia stood in the center of the room, radiant in a dress she had designed herself, talking animatedly with journalists and art lovers. She was 23 now, graduated from art school with honors, building a career on her own terms. Marcus watched from the corner, content to be an observer, but Olivia saw him and made her way through the crowd, taking his hand. "Come on, Dad," she said, pulling him forward. "I need to introduce you to someone." She led him to a painting he hadn't seen yet, larger than the others, positioned in the place of honor. It showed Marcus at his workbench, but painted in a way that made him look mythic, heroic. The light around him glowed golden, and his hands, those small, skilled hands, looked like they were crafting not just clocks but miracles. The title card read, "The Man Who Taught Me to See." "This one's not for sale," Olivia said softly, her eyes bright with tears. "This one's going home with us." Marcus couldn't speak. He just pulled her into a hug, this daughter of his heart, if not his blood, and held her while the gallery buzzed around them. That night, after the exhibition closed and the crowds dispersed, they went back to their apartment. It was bigger now, 2 bedrooms in a better building, but still modestly furnished, still filled with clocks and art supplies, with mismatched furniture and photographs on every surface. Still home. They made hot chocolate the way they always did, with cinnamon and a marshmallow melting on top, and sat on the couch together, Olivia's head on Marcus's shoulder. "Did you ever imagine," she asked, "that night when you found me in the rain, that we'd end up here?" "No," Marcus admitted. "I just knew I couldn't walk away from someone who needed help." "You saved my life," Olivia said simply. "No," Marcus said, squeezing her hand. "We saved each other. That's what family does." Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, millions of people living millions of stories. But inside that modest apartment, father and daughter sat in comfortable silence, a family built not on biology or obligation, but on choice, on showing up, on love given freely and returned tenfold. Marcus Webb, the clockmaker with dwarfism whose society had so often overlooked, had given a rejected girl not just a home, but a foundation. And Olivia Harrington, the daughter who was never enough for the family she was born into, had given him the greatest gift of all: proof that love doesn't measure by height or wealth or blood, but by the infinite capacity of the human heart. They had changed everything for each other, and that, Marcus thought, was the most valuable thing in the world. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Tell us what moved you most in this journey. What moment made you feel something deep and real? Your thoughts matter to us. They truly do. And if this story made you think about family, about love, about the ways we show up for each other, please hit that like button. It helps us continue bringing stories like this to you. Stories about real human connection, about the families we choose, about the extraordinary power of ordinary kindness. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Your presence means everything.